North Korea threatening tonight to strike the United States, the threat taking on extra urgency in the wake of U.S. intelligence analysts' assessment that North Korea has produced a miniaturized nuclear warhead. That's according to sources. So what do we know about this weapon and what are its potential capabilities? Some answers tonight from CNN's Tom Foreman. Tom?
Don, this photograph purports to show Kim Jong-un with a miniaturized nuke. And if it's a real deal, this is what we can tell about it. It would be roughly 2 feet across, probably several hundred pounds, maybe 500-600 pounds. And it would likely have the force of the bombs that were dropped on Japan by the United States 72 years ago this week. But look at the comparative size. Each of these was around 10 feet, 11 feet long, weighed about 10,000 pounds. This had to be carried by a heavy bomber to its target. Something this small, very different. This could fit into the nose cone of some of those missiles they've been testing lately, and that changes the equation remarkably, because look at the last test. That missile went about 2,300 miles up and down, well beyond the International Space Station, beyond many satellites out there. The land distance was only 621 miles because it went basically straight up and down. But if you flatten that trajectory out and were to fire it across the Earth, depending on the weight of the payload, yeah, it could reach Hawaii out in the Pacific, Alaska, Guam, and some scientists say, depending on the weight, it might actually get to the middle of the country and hit some cities there in the United States. Technically, they say that might happen. But I say technically because there are still a lot of questions. Let's consider where they stand right now. Even if we give them a green light on range and say they do have the thrust to get one this far, big questions still surround the question of accuracy. Can they get a missile into space, back out of space into the atmosphere without it tearing apart, and deliver a warhead to a chosen target? Technologically, that's very difficult. So that's a yellow light at best at this point. But bear in mind, only a few weeks ago, the nuclear warhead question, we had a red light on that because so many scientists said they don't have the technology to make a tiny nuke. Now, others are suggesting, yeah, maybe they do. They believe they do. So that's a yellow light, at least at this point. Don?
Tom Foreman, thank you very much. Let's bring in now Lieutenant Commander Stephen Rogers, a former senior military intelligence officer who was a member of the Trump Campaign Committee, and CNN military analyst Major General James Spider Marks. Hello to both of you. Thank you very much, by the way, for your service to the country. General Marks, I'm going to start with you. Based on what we just heard from Tom Foreman, what's your assessment of the danger of this situation? How dangerous is it?
Well, it's quite dangerous. Look, they have missile technology. They have for years had intermediate range ballistic missiles. They have now purportedly, and we've seen a couple tests, developed an ICBM, an intercontinental ballistic missile, which means if given its trajectory, as Tom just laid out, could reach the United States. And we've known for the longest time, over the course of many years, starting in '09, they've had multiple nuclear tests, and we've assessed that the intelligence community, has assessed that North Korea has in excess of 15 to 20 nuclear warheads. Now estimates put that at close to 60. Frankly, that's a distinction without a difference. The fact that they have any is what's significant, and now the assessment from the Defense Intelligence Agency is that they can marry those two things together. We've not seen a national intelligence estimate, what's called an NIE, from the Central Intelligence Agency, which really has the lead in terms of putting these assessments together. So you have competing intelligence, but it all leads to the same picture, which is North Korea is a nuclear state. It's got the capability potentially to reach the United States, and they've got nukes. And the fact you've got an incredibly large military in North Korea, one of the largest standing armies in the world, in excess of a million men, up-armored, a lot of capability. They own that terrain, they have forever. And you have on the south a very strong coalition force of the United States and South Korea with a whole bunch of alliance capabilities that are focused on this thing. Very dangerous situation.
If we can put the map back up about the potential range here to the United States, I want to, okay, so if you look at that, General, what exactly are these miniaturized weapons, and can you talk about the range? Because Tom Foreman said maybe in Alaska, maybe Hawaii, maybe the middle of the United States.
Yeah, I mean, everything that Tom laid out makes perfect sense. and it follows the trajectory that he described.
But can you
What
be
the
more
test-
specific, or is it
Yeah,
just
yeah.
that?
What happened, Don, is the tests, two tests for an ICBM that have been conducted, essentially went straight up and came straight down.
Right.
So if that trajectory was going to be extra atmospheric, outside of the atmosphere, and then was going to come back down, he's demonstrated the range based on the assessments that have been made by intelligence folks. Very bright scientific eyes and minds have looked at the thrust capability, whether it's liquid or whether it's solid fuel, and they have said if it can get out of the atmosphere, it's going to be less friction. When it comes back in, if it has a re-entry capability, if the North Koreans have been able to wrap that warhead with a re-entry capability, it's not going to burn up when it comes back in, and it can reach the portions of the United States.
Gotcha.
All of that is rather agnostic, kind of objective.
Okay, so Lieutenant Commander, let me bring you in, Lieutenant Commander Rogers. President Trump is threatening North Korea with, he says, fire and fury and the power of the likes of which the world has never seen. The world has never seen, I mean, the world has seen some pretty dangerous situations. What does this kind of language mean?
Okay. First, I want to thank the General for serving this country. General, thank you. Impressive military career.
Thank you.
Don,
Thanks.
with
You as
regard to
well.
what the President said, I liken it unto me being a street cop in a large city years ago. You have to speak the language of your enemies. You have to let them know you mean business. President Obama, President Clinton, President Bush, and as long as I've lived, we've had presidents who have done their darndest to try to bring North Korea to the table. They've tried to do it through conciliatory gestures, through diplomacy. It hasn't worked. We've tried sanctions, even up to last week where the president, Donald Trump, was able to get China and Russia to join in voting for extraordinary sanctions against North Korea. That didn't work. February 12th this year, short-range medium test missiles. Spring of this year, medium-range missiles. Now we are here almost towards what looks like could be a nuclear nightmare that Korea is trying to impose upon this country. So President Donald Trump assesses all of this and comes to the conclusion, you know what? They're not going to listen to diplomacy. It's time to get them to know that we mean business. And one more thing. I think the president strategically is going to cause China to step in because they're not going to have a choice. We're not going to see a war.
What about our troops on the Korean Peninsula tonight? What kind of danger are they in because of?
Well, our troops are in danger all around the world, but they're tough, they're mighty, they're ready to fight, and they will fight to win. So I would say, and look, I was one of them out there. The general was one of those troops you're talking about out there. We think about one thing, protecting our country at all costs.
Mm-hmm. General Marks, I need to get to this. North Korea reacting tonight, accusing the U.S. of indulging in war hysteria without discretion. They also say this, that they will turn the U.S. mainland into the theater of a nuclear war if it were to detect a sign of a U.S. attack. What do you think that means?
Well, frankly, what we're seeing, Don, is what has been used by the North Korean regime for 70 years. This is not new. North Korea, as a matter of routine, threatens our troops in the South Korean population, its neighbors. It barks very loudly, and over the course of the 70 years of this regime, has been able to get away with this type of behavior simply because they haven't had the capability to threaten globally. They now have a capability, by all estimates, to threaten globally. So we've seen this language before, and I think to your very good question, what are the threats tonight on the peninsula? They are the threats that were in place when I was assigned there multiple times, when I was there a whole bunch of times. They were the threats that were in place this morning before this became what we think is a verbal conflagration.
Yeah.
They are no different now than they were before.
General Marks, Lieutenant Commander Rogers, thank you both, gentlemen, very much. When we come back,
Thanks.
poll after poll showing President Trump's approval numbers hitting record lows. But what does this actually mean for the president and his party? We'll break it down.